What is the one place we all go to looking for profound gaming commentary that challenges our opinions, our presuppositions, and informs us of new movements within the zeitgeist of the industry? Of course, how dare you say porn? Jesus. Okay, whoever said Luke Stevens live gets it right. Yeah, there you go. You did a good job. You win. Congratulations. Yes. DSP, how dare you? No, obviously, frankly, I'm shocked that this is even a debate, frankly. Obviously, IGN. They put out a video and an article yesterday that is written by Simon Cardy. And if you don't know Simon actually does do really good work over at IGN. Does all sorts of, like, as you can see, previews on 007 stuff. He's done a bunch of the reviews, Blood of the Dawn Walker, the Lego Batman game. One of my most anticipated, dude. I think that looks awesome. He's done a lot of good work, and he has this video and article that he wrote that seems interesting. I've not watched it or checked it out yet, so I genuinely don't know what the argument is, but it's titled, "I'm getting bored of every PlayStation game telling the same story. Is it about time PS5 exclusives got some new ideas?" Color me intrigued. Because I've heard some people say, yeah, PlayStation games, they're all third-person adventure games. Like, okay. I mean, that's pretty wide as far as like genres go. But okay. I mean, is that bad? You know, I'm not sure what the critique is. Others will say they're just, every game's trying to be like tell an emotional story. I don't really see how that's a problem, but okay. So I'm just thoroughly intrigued by this because I've heard this sentiment echoed, but I've never seen somebody put together like a video trying to argue the point. So we're gonna see it. As far as I understand it, this video is basically just him reading out the article with some visual aids to prove the points. So, or at least to argue the points. So we're gonna check it out together today. Come with me on this journey, everyone. Let's see if they can convince us that PlayStation games are all telling the same story.
I'm a huge fan of PlayStation's first-party offerings. They've come to embody the sort of cinematic adventures I've always looked for when sitting down with a controller in my hand, feeling like genuine blockbuster events meant to be savoured. But where in the past this brand of glossy storytelling felt like new ground being trodden, I can't help but feel that recently it's become the well-worn road. It's not just that all of PlayStation's major releases adhere to the now trademarked third-person cinematic stylings. It's that the stable of developers has become seemingly obsessed with stories that explore the exact same themes, grief and revenge. And
Okay. Premise is, it's not just the styling of cinematic third-person action adventure thriller, but it's also the themes. Okay. Whenever we get into the topic of themes, though, with narratives, I feel like it can often be easy to just end up describing everything. We're like, this is another game or another story about a group of people who cared about someone, and that someone passed away, and now they seek to carry on their message and maybe even enact revenge against those they deem responsible. And you're like, okay, are we talking about The Last of Us? Are we talking about Ghost of Yotei? Are we talking about the Bible? Like, all of this kind of works. Yeah, Expedition 33. Like, you can kind of bend these archetypes, John Wick, into any sort of story you want, because ultimately there's a few key human emotions and they typically tie stories together. I don't think it's necessarily an issue. I would love to see an example. I'm guessing he's going to bring up some examples of wackier, crazier stuff that's a little bit more interesting that he'd like to see spruced or used to spruce it up, but let's see. Moana.
I'm starting to get a little tired of it. As a rule, these games are all impeccably well made, but I'm starting to miss that era when PlayStation's range felt wider and things were a little bit more fun.
I think it was it an interview with, I think it was with Neil Druckmann. I want to say it was with Neil, where he was asked about like their philosophy at Naughty Dog in making games. And they were asked, like, do you try to make games fun? And, oh, here, I think this is it. We don't use the word fun. The Last of Us 2 is not a joyride. And I think that it is like true that a lot of games, and a lot of really profound games even, same with movies and stuff, are not fun. They're not enjoyable in the traditional use of the word, you know? Like, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad at the same time. Is what's a really good movie? What's like a really, really good movie? Schindler's List is not a fun movie. It's not a movie you're gonna watch and feel like good after. You're gonna feel horrible and it's kind of miserable. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's telling an important story and you can learn from the story and reflect, and it's worth existing even if it's not enjoyable in the traditional sense. Now, it's a separate issue if you're like, I only like fun games or games that make me happy or, you know, lighten me up. That's fine. But that might not be what the creators were trying to do, right? Like it could be that Ghost of Yotei, the writers were not trying to make something fun, maybe satisfying, engaging, captivating, something like that, but maybe not fun in that like silly or lighthearted way. But anyway, continue. We'll let him keep talking.
The realization that so many PlayStation games have explored the same grim story themes struck me when playing through Sucker Punch's new Ghost of Yotei. While I thoroughly enjoyed it and admire its consistently exciting approach to combat and genuine sense of discovery it creates for exploration, I couldn't help but feel I'd been told its story before. As Atsu, you're tasked with avenging the death of your parents on a blood-soaked...
Did he say revenging?
Before. As Atsu, you're tasked with avenging the death...
I think it's with avenging, but with his accent, it sounded like with revenging. I think that's what it was. Anyway, sorry. I was like, revenging? It's like, is that a word? Is that a British word? He said avenging. It sounded weird. Sorry, I'm being a prick. Sorry.
Of your parents on a blood-soaked journey across 17th century Japan as you hunt down each of the Yotei 6. Not only is this tale unfortunately close to the plot of Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I also played to completion earlier this year, but it's the same combination of fiery revenge arc crossed with meditations on what it is to grieve that has become something of a hallmark for PlayStation Studios in recent years.
I'm sorry it came to this, little wolf.
2019's The Last of Us Part 2 is an obvious trailblazer, with Ellie's dark descent into a rage-filled embodiment of revenge coming as a result of the death of her father figure Joel.
I mean, I think one of the things that's happened just in media for the last like 10 years also, maybe even longer than that, is this like misery porn that unfortunately is very, very common. But it's like, how do we make the most miserable thing that is just Oscar bait? Like, it's literally just a story that's miserable and horrible in every way imaginable. And it's basically intended to bait Oscars or awards because journalists and critics tend to love miserable stories like that because they're profound. Because, it's like they say, it's not necessarily a good story. It's an important story. The Last of Us 2 isn't like a fun story or point of adventure, but it's an important one. So if you don't like it, you're a bad person. That's the key, frankly. That's the key. And I think that definitely is true of a lot of games where they can lean into the depressing plot lines too much. It's why variability, I think, is important. You got to have moments of serious, gritty narrative and then moments of levity to lighten it up. It's like in God of War, where you can have a really intense moment and then Brock and Sindri will say something that makes you kind of chuckle and is just kind of silly, or something really intense happens and then you see Odin and he's kind of like hamming it up and being very charismatic and he lightens the tension even though the stakes are still there. That's what you need to like carry a story through and keep something that is dark and gritty still engaging. It was one of the frustrations I had with The Last of Us Part 2, which is just frankly that by the end of that game, you're exhausted. Like, it is one of the most emotionally exhausting pieces of media I think that's ever been created. By the time it's done, you are jubilant, not because the game was necessarily like terrible, but because like it's just so emotionally taxing. For just the moment you think you could have a happy ending, something more horrible happened. Like, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Anyway, continue.
That, of course, was the sequel to the 2013 original. They explored how Joel struggled to cope with the death of his own daughter.
Spoilers.
At the time, The Last of Us was seen as fueling a wave of sad dad games, including
dad.
2018's God of War. But in hindsight, these were just the building blocks for PlayStation's preoccupation with grief.
Find your way home.
Preoccupation with grief. It's interesting. Does PlayStation have a preoccupation with grief? I mean, I'd say they've experimented with other stuff. Narratively, Concord, I would say, was quite different. Maybe revenge? I don't think Kratos is seeking revenge in this. I guess it's a duology, not a trilogy. I think the whole point of Kratos, no spoilers for Ragnarok, but Kratos' whole character arc is being better. You know, Astrobot. Yeah, I mean, Astrobot's the obvious example, but I mean, I think to a certain extent, this stuff is also like players are connecting obviously with the stories of The Last of Us, with the stories of like God of War Ragnarok. They're connecting with these plot lines in Ghost of Tsushima, and I think he references Death Stranding later because I saw some clips he's going to show. So, you know, players are connecting with those stories and worlds. I don't think that necessarily means that PlayStation has the preoccupation. I think it's more maybe the audience is connecting with those stories. But there's also other examples you can point to where I don't think they are totally focused on grief or misery, because they've also put out things like Spider-Man, which Spider-Man has topics, and there are moments in Spider-Man for the PS4 that are sad. No spoilers again, but there's a couple moments, but I wouldn't say that game is hyper fixated on misery or grief or anything. Same with like Ratchet and Clank or Astrobot, and you know, for every example there's a counter example. But okay, continuing.
You are free.
2022's God of War Ragnarok is a story fueled by the loss of mothers and sons and the anger that comes with them. Insomniac's Spider-Man series follows both Peter Parker and Miles Morales as they attempt to overcome supervillain threats, as well as wrestle with their demons stemming from dead parental figures.
She never thought about herself, even when she was struggling to breathe.
2020's Returnal is a looping sci-fi nightmare born out of the protagonist Celine's familial grief-related trauma. And then there's 2025's other big PlayStation exclusive Death Stranding 2 on the Beach, which may not technically be a first-party game, but certainly is a verifiable feast of maternal and paternal anguish. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of all the games listed above, each singular in its depictions of characters and each offering wildly different gameplay experiences. But when viewed as a whole, it's easy to hear that their stories are all being sung from the same hymn sheet. Familial grief is at the centre of all of these stories, and while I certainly feel that mature themes have a place in games, it is all starting to feel like I'm getting hit around the head with the same ideas at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that familial grief being a consistent trend, but I think also perhaps there's a component of this where it's like it's just people being sad and then trying to deal with that sadness is a story that, or a jumping off point for a story that you can do a lot with. Whereas like, what's the alternative? Do you have like in Returnal, it's like, nope, she comes from a really solid family background. She is very mentally well and mentally healthy, and she has no sadness, and she's just really fulfilled and is happy. Like when everything is good, there's nowhere to go. You know, there's no character arc, there's no conflict, there's nothing you can do. I do think I'm interested in hearing new topics or new the points of exploration, new things that they could do. And I think they will do that. For example, we've heard rumors and rumblings, and even Neil has talked about what they're going to do for the next Naughty Dog game and where they're going. And apparently they're going to shake it up with something a lot more lighthearted and interesting for Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. And so they're just going to, instead of discussing all this stuff, they're going to discuss like religion and stuff. So it's going to be a topic of like religious conflict, which I bet will be received much better. I can't imagine that going in any sort of controversial way. Buckle up, everybody. That one's going to be fun. Oh, baby. Yeah, buckle up for that. That's going to be... Oh.
The cycle of violence is in very real danger of becoming a loop of diminishing returns.
You gutted my father.
He defied Lord Saito.
I think my bigger frustration is not with the themes, it's with the minutia, frankly. Like the reason why the revenge plotline is a trope is because it works. It's It's a trope and it's something we've seen before because it works. On the flip side, I think what's more important is the execution of the trope or of the idea. And so I think that it's important to evaluate that as well, not just focus on the broad strokes, but also on the small ones. And for me, like, I think a lot of characters that have come out in some of these stories are so dry that it becomes really hard to find them interesting, or they're just downright cringy, which is a problem I ran into with like Spider-Man 2, where I felt like the writing in Spider-Man 2 took a nosedive after the first game. And even after Miles Morales, I thought Miles Morales was like already, it wasn't as good as the original Spider-Man game on PS4, but I was like, oh, well, it's a spin-off game, so it's probably not the A-team. But then Spider-Man 2, I thought was a cringe fest a lot of the time, and it was really, really bizarre. But again, that's a separate issue.
Of course, it's true that not every PS5 game follows this pattern. Astrobot isn't an exploration of generational trauma in deep space, but you catch my drift. I think that's incidentally what I enjoyed so much about Team Asobi's Ode to PlayStation of old, with its joy and colour standing out from the otherwise morose crowd.
And interestingly, when Astrobot came out, a lot of people were complaining, this is what we get. We've been waiting for the next God of War and the next Naughty Dog game, and this is what we get. And so, while there are certainly people like Simon who are looking for something more lighthearted and different, there's also a lot of people who are looking for, something darker and grittier and more intense. And so, the market's big, the tent is large, so there's plenty of room for everybody to fit underneath it. But I've definitely heard this sentiment echoed.
It felt like a rarity, but it never used to be this way. The PS3 gave us Naughty Dog's Uncharted era, which, although it eventually ventured into more melancholic territory in A Thief's End, firmly planted its flag in themes of adventure with a tone ripped from the pages of Pulp Fiction.
But here's an honest question. And I genuinely don't know, so please in chat, answer me. Genuine question. If Uncharted 2, for example, if Uncharted 2 launched today, and we'll just say that, modern production standards, so, it's Naughty Dog levels of production quality in 2025, would it be received the same way narratively, I'm talking, as it was back when it launched in whatever that was, 2010, maybe? I think, because I think that like the Amy Hennig era of Uncharted was a product of its time. Like it was campy. It was kind of, there were moments which were kind of silly. I mean, obviously the first game has like literal Nazi zombies, which are like a stereotypical thing from the late 2000s. But I think that it was a product of its time. And as in the same way, in this time, or at least the last handful of years, a lot of games on the big AAA scale are launching with much grittier narratives, much darker, much more serious. And I think part of that is because the industry has matured. And a lot of people who grew up playing games like Uncharted have ended up in adulthood and we're looking for something with a little more meat on the bone. I think there is a place for games that are a little more lighthearted. Absolutely. And I think, the success of some of these other games certainly demonstrates it. But I think that the industry has matured a lot as well. And they like stories that challenge them narratively. It's why something like Expedition 33, again, no spoilers, connected with a lot of people because it's intense. And there's a lot of moments in there which are kind of tough to get through emotionally, let's just say. Whereas something like Uncharted 2, the stakes are generally lower and you kind of know that everything's going to end up okay. It's like a standard blockbuster movie where, all the characters are going to make it out okay. There's not going to be any consequence in the story. Like, the bad guy's going to lose after he gets done with his monologue. It's campy, whereas that's something that a lot of gamers have seen and heard before. And so they're looking for something a little bit more intense, a little more intense. A lot of you guys are saying, no, I don't think so. No, it wouldn't. Product of its time, sadly. No, because it would be considered misogynistic and Nathan Drake would be swapped out with Nina Drake. How dare you, JD? Unironically, I think the next Uncharted game probably does have his daughter. What is his daughter's name? Not Ellie. What is Nathan's daughter's name? Well, Elena's his wife. What is her? Cassie. Thank you. You guys are better than Google. That's great. So anyway, continuing on. I think that like Uncharted 2 was a product of its time, but I think if it launched today, it would be found probably narratively lacking.
I've always had a soft spot for Insomniac's Resistance and its World War II/sci-fi warfare mashup, as well as Little Big Planet, which, all the way at the other end of the tonal spectrum, celebrated creativity and community.
Welcome to...
Oh, another example of this, though, is like It Takes Two or Split Fiction. Games that can explore more intense narratives and topics, but still retain a lighter tone. And it's that contrast that I really love about those games, because they can explore something as intense as divorce, which is what It Takes Two explores, but in a silly way with like their book of love. You know, it's like honestly a really good time, but it explores a very serious and relatable topic for a lot of people. And I love those games. Anyway.
Come chummy chum chum.
Collaboration.
Where the sky is strewn with circling clouds of imagination.
Yes, these games all contained varying levels of character nuances, but were all fundamentally about different things. Treasure hunting, alien invasions, and personal expression. They weren't all trying to serve the same story, and I can't help but feel that if a new Jak and Daxter game were to come out today, it would be about an Otzel's thirst for revenge against the killers of his blonde-haired friend.
That would be really funny. Like, imagine a Jak and Daxter game, but it's like super gory and intense. The whole thing is an allegory for the war in Ukraine. And it's like, bro, what are we doing? Like, this is way too intense. Yeah, but I think that we can point to other examples of games that have launched, like Ratchet and Clank, which are not that serious. Like, they're much more lighthearted, frankly, you know? So I think for every example, there's counterexamples, but perhaps the point is that some of the biggest studios are now focusing on darker, grittier, more mature content, whereas they used to focus on more lighthearted stuff. But I think that's just because the majority of the market and most of the money is sitting on the more mature content, and that's where they're putting their resources. And the same way, like Naughty Dog, yeah, they could go back and do a Crash Bandicoot sequel. They could. Do I think that's the best use of their talents? Personally, not. I don't think that would probably go over too well, even if they were to do that. Like, I don't think it would even sell remarkably well. Like, can you imagine if that's what they've been working on all these years? I don't think it would go over too well.
Hang on, Dax. It's gonna be close.
I hope that future PlayStation exclusives can look to this more varied, interesting past for inspiration, even when choosing to tackle more serious subject matters. Team Ico's PS2 classic Shadow of the Colossus took on a mournful tone, but found something truly unique and poignant within it, at a time when such ideas were far less common in games. It stands as a unique masterpiece to this day, telling its tale through vagaries and minimal cutscenes, a far cry from the trademark cinematic style we now expect of PlayStation games. What we didn't have back in the mid-2000s were 5 more PS2 releases that took its exact contemplations on love and loss and told the same story in a different wrapping. Every time you played something new from Sony Studios on the now 25-year-old console, it felt like a brand new experiment with a different story to tell, not just a variation on a theme. That brings me back to Ghost of Yotai.
I mean, I think part of the benefit of those older generations, though, was that it was relatively cheap to experiment and try different things through new IP. Nowadays, for like Sucker Punch or Naughty Dog or Santa Monica or whoever, for them to spend 4 years, 5 years building a new IP is a huge risk. I mean, it's not something everybody's going to get the opportunity to do. And so as a result, like, the money getting thrown at that needs to be pretty locked in. You have to be pretty confident in the team before you let them try something fresh and different. I mean, it's not something that's taken lightly, because these projects are so huge and so expensive. And you could say maybe that's part of the innovation, is coming up with ideas that are less expensive, but it's also the opportunity cost. If you know that, like, Sucker Punch or maybe, you know, Naughty Dog is a better example. Naughty Dog could pump out a Crash Bandicoot game in 2 years, and it's just, or something, you know, a spiritual successor. Yeah, they could do that probably pretty cheaply, but what is the opportunity cost of doing that when they could have spent that time working on The Last of Us Part 3, which will blow up and sell 20 million copies? I mean, it's much more valuable to PlayStation to utilize their talents doing something else, even if they could pump out something cheaper that wouldn't perform as well, you know? Yeah, true. Better make it a live service. Exactly.
A game that is superior to its predecessor in almost every aspect, barring its central story.
My name is Atsu.
While I connect to Atsu more than I ever did Jin Sakai, she's a much warmer presence to spend a few dozen hours with. Ghost of Tsushima's narrative explores different, fresher ground. The story balances the personal struggles of Jin against the backdrop of an invasion of a nation, with themes of honor, betrayal, and belonging striking a chord and making it stand out when it arrived hot on the heels of The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020, before grief seemingly took hold of every Sony storyteller. Perhaps PlayStation's interest in grief is a reflection of the state of the world, though. When viewed through the lens of when PS5 exclusives like Ghost of Yotai and Death Stranding were being written, that melancholy is somewhat understandable. The COVID pandemic inarguably took hold of our planet in the years 2020 and 2021, and as such, themes surrounding unexpected loss and mass trauma would no doubt have been at the forefront of many minds. It will therefore be intriguing to see if this pattern will continue much further then, now that the world has somewhat settled back into what it looked like beforehand. Will the stories being told in projects that began production post-2022 mirror a different state of the planet, or continue to look inside ourselves at our darkest moments?
It's true. At this point, we need a lot more games exploring student loan debt, DoorDash deliveries being more expensive, Starbucks drinks having writing on them for some incomprehensible reason. We need topical, relatable stuff. Yeah, let's do a Saints Row reboot. Let's do it.
These are, of course, all valid tales to tell, and I'm a huge proponent of art being reflections of those creating it.
Yeah.
But I can't help but...
All jokes aside, I do think he's right. A lot of the games we're playing right now in the last couple of years were made predominantly during, like, the dark times. And so I do think those themes and ideas and how a lot of people were feeling is reflected within the games that came out of that era. Just like the games made in the late 2000s were reflective of that era, and the games made in the 2010s were reflective of that era. And so, you know, things will evolve and change. I think if anything, I'm hoping that games become a little bit more irreverent and crazy and wacky this coming generation. More likely, I think that they probably are going to just utilize a lot of like AI tools, and I think that the next generation of consoles and open world games, for example, and RPGs and everything, it's going to be just about scale and volume. I think it's all going to be just like there's 1,000 NPCs in the cities and in the city, and they all have their own names and schedules and routines and dialogue and stuff, and it's all going to be built around large language models, and there's probably going to be modes where you can like turn on your microphone and have conversations with the NPCs in the world. I think that like that type of gimmick, that type of thing is going to be huge in the next generation. Locking it in now, locking it in. And if you're like, Luke, you sound crazy, dude, I predicted Suicide Squad back in like 2017, bro. 2018. I forget when I made that critique, but yeah. My most successful video of all time, the Batman Arkham series critique. I kind of forgot about it, but I did in fact predict the Suicide Squad thing in there. I thought it was going to be cool. I was like, it would be really cool. I think they should make a Suicide Squad game and they should do this and this. And I mean, in my opinion, they messed it up, but.
For a little more variety going forward.
I will find every last member of the Yote Six. And I will bring you peace.
There's a reason to be hopeful and skeptical, considering what Sony has coming up next. Insomniac's Wolverine looks to be delivering on all of the gore and decapitation you'd hope to see, but will that mature rating be reflected in its themes?
Death's always waiting.
I did see one guy reply to that sequence where he shoves the blades up the dude's face, and he's like, it's hard for me to get really into this when I know that guy's gonna hop back up in a second with 60% health left. It's like, I kind of see what you mean. Yeah. Because let's be real. Yeah, probably. He's probably going to hop back up and be fine. It's why I think they're doing the enemies that are like android hybrid, whatever, cyborgs, because then you can you can slash at them and they don't immediately die, whereas a normal person would get cut in half. So yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a thing. But I'm sure any of these things you're thinking of now, like, oh, I wonder how they're gonna deal with Wolverine not being able to die like that. Like that I'm sure was the first thing they thought about 5 years ago. Okay, so they're way ahead of you. It'll be okay.
Logan is certainly a character consumed by lust for revenge. Will that see us
Lust.
taken down a
Shout out
familiar
Lust.
path of burying past demons through ultra-violence? Or will we get an altogether different story that taps into a different part of his psyche? James Mangold's Logan already told us a tale that would have slotted nicely into PlayStation's sad dad canon, as X-23 tapped into the softer side of his adamantium body. So I do hope we don't just get a rerun of that idea here. We also know that Saros is on the way from Housemarque in March, and it certainly looked impressive in the most recent State of Play stream. As for Naughty Dog, the ground zero of this long-running era of grief, we know that the studio will be
Sorry. What a way to frame it.
taking on the sci-fi realm next with Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. Its first trailer was promising, delivering a more fun-filled tone than we'd ever dream of seeing from The Last of Us.
Wait, fun-filled? Did he say fun-filled?
First trailer was promising, delivering a more fun-filled tone than we'd ever dream of seeing from The Last of Us.
I mean, like, was it though? Like, genuine question. Did anybody watch that trailer and think it came off as fun-filled? Like, I didn't. Like, it's not to say it's bad, but it didn't come off as fun-filled to me. Like, it definitely seemed like a Naughty Dog game, like a lot of very kind of quiet, sort of whispery dialogue about stuff you're not really sure what it has to do with. Like, maybe, okay, let's be fair. I already have the trailer pulled up. Let's just play a little snippet. Is this fun-filled?
Years. Anyone who even flies close to it is never heard from again.
Superstitions.
No. Superstitions are the crazy rumors about what happened on that planet. These are facts.
You worry too much.
You know what I worry just to write about? I say we wait for him to leave, or how about we find a new lead? He's not worth it. I'm wasting my time, aren't I?
Can you please claim him? I don't need another hunter swooping in.
Who is swooping? No one is crazy enough to go there.
He clearly is.
He is clearly desperate.
And so am I, so claim him, or I will find another agent.
Anyone else with all your fucking shit? Okay, alright, you know what? There, you're the boss.
Thank you.
Listen, kid.
I mean, I genuinely don't see it. Like, again, it's not to say it's bad. I just genuinely don't see how you could call that fun-filled. I just, that's genuinely surprising. But anyway.
Of course, we've barely scratched the surface here, but it would be fantastic to see Naughty Dog rediscovering some of that Uncharted levity here.
Okay, he has to be sarcastic, right? Like, look at this thing, dude. Neil has said that they're going to be like, okay, let me find the exact quote. I don't want anybody being like, you misquote him. Druckmann, Intergalactic. Okay, this is a quote. The story explores, quote, what happens when you put your faith in different institutions. It's centered on a fictional religion and includes science fiction elements, taking inspiration from anime like Akira and Cowboy Bebop, applying techniques learned in creating Uncharted and The Last of Us. Developers sought to expand on gameplay elements. They created thousands of years of history for Semperia's religion. They wanted the player to feel lost and alone, particularly or partly achieved by the lack of non-playable allies like other Naughty Dog games. I don't think it's gonna feel like old school Uncharted or feel silly and lighthearted. I'm sorry. He's gotta be sarcastic. Like, there's no way he's being real when he's like, I hope they recapture the silly, lighthearted things of Uncharted. Like, there's just no way.
Here, but it would be fantastic to see Naughty Dog rediscovering some of that Uncharted levity here. Both of these
Timothy, British people, shake my head. Oh man, I like, again, I can't stress this enough. It doesn't mean that Intergalactic will be bad. I am not saying that. I'm just saying, based on the trailer and literally everything we know about the game, I don't know how you could say that it is looking like lighthearted or fun, and like I just genuinely don't see that. I mean, it seems like a little bit of cope, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. I just genuinely don't know how you watch that trailer and read what we know about it and come off as like, this maybe like there's no way.
These upcoming PS5 games, incidentally, are stories about people investigating lost off-world colonies. I hope for my sake that they find wildly different stories to tell on each of them, rather than discover reminders of the grief they've left behind.
Now, locking it in now, the next few big PlayStation games are going to take heavy inspiration from Elden Ring. There's going to be far less narrative exposition. There's going to be a lot more mysterious stuff that is not really explained, except for maybe in one scroll with 3 words that you're supposed to infer 15 pages of world building. I think that that's probably where they're going. So yeah, I don't think they're looking to Uncharted of 2009 for inspiration. I think they're looking back to like Elden Ring for inspiration, much more likely.
After every death, I always come back stronger.
Arms,
For more on
the
Ghost of
game.
Yotai, make sure to check out our review.
So interesting video, Simon. I will say interesting video. I think genuinely, I understand what is being said. A lot of the games, and I think, the vibe is certainly that a lot of PlayStation's biggest ticket games and the biggest ones on the AAA side have focused on darker themes. They're more gritty and grounded, in large part probably inspired by Naughty Dog's efforts. I think that's clear that that's where they've started to shift. But I think part of the reason they shifted there is because that's what gamers are connecting with and are happy about and buying. So, and it's also what critics are rewarding with Game of the Year awards and with high Metacritic scores and stuff. So I think it's emergent out of a sort of player base that is hungry for something like that. Do I think things are going to change? No, I mean, sort of. Things will shift and will move, and in 5 years we'll look back and we will see how we progressed into where we are at that point. But I don't think there's going to be some massive correction back to like silly lighthearted games or anything, because I think we do still get some of those and they perform well. It's just when you're talking about spending $200 million on a game, it needs to be a sure bet, and one that the audience has demonstrated that they are interested in and that they like. And that's seemingly what they're going to do here. And you can have intense stories with dark, gritty stuff explored, and also have some lighthearted moments in it. It doesn't have to just be a misery simulator like some games can certainly turn into. I mean, even Expedition 33, there are some genuinely silly moments in that game with like, you remember when you meet Monaco? Like, it's just a quick little line, but it genuinely made me laugh out loud.
The question. I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
No case.
Like, it was genuinely pretty funny. Like, and there's plenty of these moments in the game. It's like things are really intense, but then there's just a little bitty moment where things are just like a little silly, and it just makes you chuckle. And that's how you keep it balanced. Like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, little misery, little joy, little goofy, little depression. Like, that's how you make a modern story that connects with modern audiences. And I think it's also a reflection of modern individual sentiments, certainly, where there's a lot of darkness in this world, but we often are looking for a break from the misery. You still have to deal with the misery, but you want a break every once in a while. You want a breather. You want something to take your mind off of it and to not have to deal with it anymore. And that's not a problem. Again, it's a reflection of the time in which we are existing. And so we're just navigating it as best we can. Right? We're just navigating it. Anyway, interesting video. I personally do not feel, how do I put it? I personally am not convinced that there's like a problem right now with how PlayStation games are doing it, or that every PlayStation game is telling the same story. I guess, again, specifically, we can point to games like Expedition 33, but he's specifically bringing up PlayStation games, not just industry-wide games. But I think, again, what Sony's trying to do is they're trying to fill the hole in the market that their audience and their customers are looking for them to fill and engage with. And so they are connecting where they think that they can. And even within their own first party library, there's been other games that they have put out that have connected with players in a more lighthearted way. It's just, you know, the biggest stuff is giving players what they want. The problem is the live service investments. I mean, that's a massive problem. I don't know if that's the problem with this particular thing, but it is a massive problem. Yeah. Wasting billions on nonsense that you cancel or that you launch and then unlaunch. That's certainly a component. He took my thing.